the lifelong psychology of growing up without love, there's a question we rarely ask out loud, even though it haunts millions of us in the quietest corners of our lives. What happens to a person who grows up without love? Not the kind of love that appears in birthday cards or polite family dinners, but the visceral, soul-nurturing kind, the kind that makes you feel real, safe, and wanted just for being alive. When that kind of love is absent, something in us begins to form differently. We adapt, yes, we survive, but we also fracture in places we can't always name. This video is a journey into that fracture. A map of the invisible terrain left behind when love is not part of a child's foundation. And if you stick with me, I promise we'll go deep, because this is not just psychology. This is philosophy. This is about meaning, about selfhood, about what it truly takes to repair a life that began with emotional starvation. Growing up without love is not always obvious. That's what makes it so insidious. Because we imagine it looks like abuse, chaos, abandonment, and sometimes it does. But often it's quieter. It's the absence of warmth, the lack of attunement, the way no one looked at you and said you matter, not because of what you do, but because you exist. It's the way your joy wasn't mirrored, your pain wasn't held, your fears weren't soothed. And so instead of developing a sturdy sense of self, you develop strategies. You become hyper-independent, or overly pleasing, or chronically anxious. You become what you think others want because you never learned that you were enough without performing. But here's the paradox. If you grow up without love, you don't stop needing it. The need just goes underground. It becomes unconscious. It turns into patterns, into deep, confusing longings, into relationships that feel magnetic but unsafe, into careers that chase validation instead of meaning, into addictions not always to substances, but to people, to achievement, to approval. And the worst part? You don't even know that love is what's missing, because you've never truly felt it. So how could you know what to look for? This is where the psychology meets the philosophy. Because we must ask, what is the self if it was never seen clearly by another? Are we born with an identity, or is it shaped in response to how we are received? If no one reflected your worth back to you as a child, do you even know you're real? These are not abstract questions. They are the quiet torment behind so many adult struggles, relationships that implode, mental health that deteriorates, an inner critic that never shuts up. And yet, when we trace it back, we often find the same root, the foundational experience of not being loved in a way that made us feel safe to exist.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
Think about this. When a baby cries and no one comes, something essential breaks. Not just trust in others, but trust in the world. In reality itself, the child begins to learn that their needs are too much, that their emotions are dangerous, that connection is conditional, and so they adapt, they suppress, they become easy, good, independent. Adults praise them for it, not realizing they're looking at a child in emotional exile. And that exile doesn't end with childhood. It follows you into adulthood like a ghost, showing up in moments of intimacy, in your inability to ask for help, in your shame around vulnerability, in your deep, aching loneliness, even when surrounded by others. Now, let me ask you something that might hit a nerve. What parts of yourself did you have to kill in order to be loved, or at least tolerated as a child? What pieces of your joy, your wildness, your truth did you bury because they weren't met with warmth? And what would happen if those parts came back to life now? Could you even recognize them? Would you feel worthy of them? Here's the tragedy. Many of us walk through life believing we're broken when in fact we're just unloved. Not because we were unlovable, but because the people around us were unequipped, unavailable, or damaged themselves. But the mind doesn't make that distinction. The child doesn't think my parents are wounded. The child thinks there's something wrong with me. And that belief becomes the architecture of the self. It becomes the lens through which you see everything: your relationships, your purpose, your future. So what do we do with this? How do we begin to heal from a wound that predates language? The first step is seeing it clearly, naming it, understanding that love is not a luxury, it's a biological necessity. Just as we need food and water, we need attuned, consistent emotional connection to thrive. When that's missing, it's not just sad, it's traumatic, because the absence of love is not neutral. It creates distortions. It teaches us to fear closeness, to distrust our needs, to believe that suffering is normal. But here's the hopeful part. What was learned can be unlearned. What was absent can be cultivated. We can't rewrite the past, but we can reparent ourselves. We can choose relationships that reflect our worth. We can learn to sit with the discomfort of being seen. We can stop performing and start revealing. We can grieve the love we didn't get, and in that grief, make space for the love we can finally receive. And that journey, that awakening, it's not just personal, it's spiritual, it's philosophical. Because to reclaim your right to love is to reclaim your right to exist, fully, freely, unapologetically. Emotional starvation and the false self. When survival replaces authenticity, when we grow up without love, we don't simply become unloved, we become unreal. Not in the literal sense, but in the psychological and existential sense. We learn to build a version of ourselves that can survive in a world that has no room for who we truly are. This construction is what psychologists and philosophers alike call the false self, a mask, a strategy, a survival mechanism. It's not fake in the way we typically use the word. It's something far more tragic. The false self is crafted from necessity. It is the version of you that was rewarded, or at least tolerated, in a loveless or emotionally barren environment. And the longer you wear it, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before you needed it. Let's break this down. A child who isn't met with love and emotional presence still has to survive. And survival, especially for the emotionally neglected, often means minimizing your needs, hiding your pain, becoming what others want. If your parents wanted quiet, you learned to be silent. If they wanted obedience, you perfected performance. If they only responded to your achievements, you tied your worth to success. And over time, you forgot that these were roles you stepped into. They began to feel like your personality. But deep beneath them, your real self, the one who cried, who dreamed, who needed, was buried alive. And here's where it gets even more complex. The false self works. That's the seduction. It gets you praise. It keeps you from abandonment. It makes you functional. But it also makes you hollow, because it's not you. It's a version of you that was shaped to avoid pain, not to express truth. And so you walk through life with this invisible ache. You achieve, but you don't feel fulfilled. You're liked, but you don't feel seen. You're in relationships, but you feel alone. Why? Because the people around you aren't connecting with you. They're connecting with the mask. Let me ask you something that might shake you. How many of your relationships are built on who you've pretended to be, rather than who you actually are? And if you stopped performing, if you dropped the act, who would still stay? Who would still love you, not for your usefulness or your achievements, but for your essence? This is the crisis of the false self. It protects you from rejection, but it also prevents intimacy. And the longer you live from it, the more alienated you become, not just from others, but from yourself. You begin to lose the thread of your own desires. You don't know what you feel, what you want, what you value. You become a chameleon, adapting to everyone else's needs while completely abandoning your own. And the world might call you successful, strong, admirable, but inside, you're starving. Starving for authenticity. Starving for connection. Starving for love that doesn't require you to earn it. This starvation isn't merely emotional, it's existential. Because without love, without being seen in your truth, your very sense of reality begins to blur. You start to wonder, am I only worthy when I'm useful? Do I matter if I stop performing? Is there anything left of me beneath this mask? These are not just therapeutic questions, they are philosophical ones. They force us to confront the core of human existence. What does it mean to be real? What does it mean to be loved, not for what you do, but for who you are? The tragedy is that many people live entire lives from this false self. They become parents, partners, professionals, all while believing that their work is conditional, and then they pass it down. They teach their children to perform, to please, to suppress, not because they are cruel, but because they never learned another way. The cycle continues not out of malice, but out of unconsciousness. But there's a way out, and it begins with radical honesty, with asking yourself, what parts of me have I hidden to survive? What would it mean to live without the mask? This is not a comfortable journey. In fact, it's terrifying, because the false self, for all its pain, is familiar. It feels safe, but safety is not the same as freedom, and healing is not always about feeling better, it's about feeling real. To dismantle the false self is to grieve, to rage, to feel all the emotions you once had to suppress. It's to reclaim your right to need, to feel, to express. It's to risk being misunderstood in order to finally be seen. And in doing so, you begin to reconnect with the parts of you that were exiled. You begin to remember who you were before the world told you who you had to be. Because the truth is, you were never unlovable. You were just unseen. And now it's your turn to see yourself. Loneliness in the crowd, how growing up unloved warps adult relationships. It's one of the most painful ironies of the human experience. You can be surrounded by people, even loved by them, and still feel completely alone. And for those of us who grew up without love, not just the presence of people, but the presence of attuned, reflective, holding love, this kind of loneliness is not occasional. It's chronic. It's woven into the fabric of our social lives, our romantic connections, our friendships. We enter adulthood believing we are ready for intimacy, but what we're actually prepared for is survival. We don't know how to let others in without losing ourselves. And so we perform connection. We simulate closeness. But deep inside, we remain untouched. Think about it. If your earliest experiences of love were conditional based on obedience, silence, achievement, or emotional labor, you didn't learn that relationships are a place for mutual nourishment. You learned that relationships are a transaction. You give what others want, and in return, you hope not to be abandoned. This is not love. This is emotional bargaining. And most of us carry this script into adulthood without even realizing it. We attract partners who mirror our earliest caregivers, people who are distant, critical, or emotionally unavailable, not because we're masochists, but because it feels familiar, predictable, safe in its danger. And when we do find someone who offers real love, unconditional, warm, present, it often feels unbearable. We sabotage, we withdraw, we question their motives. Because real love threatens the identity we built around being unlovable. It contradicts the story we've told ourselves for decades. And so we push it away, not consciously but reflexively, as if love itself were a threat. Let me ask you something that might sting. How much of the love you've received in life have you actually allowed yourself to feel? Not just intellectually acknowledged, but deeply felt in your body, in your nervous system, in your heart. And if the answer is not much, then ask yourself why. What are you protecting yourself from? What would happen if you let the love in? For many of us, the answer is simple but devastating. We're afraid we'll lose it, or worse, that we don't deserve it. And this fear doesn't just live in our thoughts, it lives in our bodies. Our nervous systems were shaped in environments where love was either absent or dangerous. So even when we find it, we don't trust it. We brace for the fall. We scan for rejection. We interpret neutrality as contempt. We read silence as judgment. And we end up confirming the very loneliness we're trying to escape. This is the vicious cycle. We long for connection, but we don't feel worthy of it. So we either chase the unavailable or run from the available. In both cases, we stay alone. And here's the most tragic part. From the outside, no one can see it. We look fine. We're functional. We're even charismatic. But inside, we're starving. We're isolated in a way that no one can touch because we don't let them. And yet, the path to healing is not about finding the perfect partner or the most understanding friend. It's about learning to tolerate love, to stop treating it like a threat, to let it in slowly, awkwardly, imperfectly. And that begins with you, with how you talk to yourself, with whether you allow your own emotions to exist without judgment. Because if you can't hold space for your own inner world, you will always struggle to let someone else in. So here's a radical question. What if you stopped trying to earn love and started learning to receive it? What if the loneliness you feel isn't just about who's not around you, but about the walls you've built to protect yourself from being hurt again? These walls were necessary once. They kept you safe, but now they keep you separate. And the heartbreaking truth is that the person who most needs your love, the one you've abandoned the longest, is you. Until you reclaim that relationship, no external connection will ever feel quite enough. Because we don't just fall in love with others, we fall through them, into ourselves. And if there's no self to land in, the love vanishes like smoke. Healing from this isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming present. Present enough to notice when you're disconnecting, when you're shrinking, when you're pretending, and then gently, without judgment, choosing a different way. choosing to stay, to breathe, to receive. Because maybe the opposite of loneliness isn't people, maybe it's presence. And maybe love isn't something we find, maybe it's something we learn to allow. Learning to belong to yourself, reclaiming love from the inside out at some point. After enough disappointments, betrayals, and hollow connections, we come to a quiet and terrifying realization. No one is coming to save us. No one is going to reach into the void within us and fill it with the love we never received. And in that moment, we are faced with a truth that's as liberating as it is devastating. We are the ones we've been waiting for. Real healing, the kind that rewrites the story from the inside out, begins not with others, but with ourselves. It begins when we stop chasing love out there and start learning to come home to our own hearts. But how do you love yourself when you were never loved in the way you needed? How do you meet your own eyes in the mirror and believe you're worthy of care, presence, and joy? This isn't about mantras or Instagram affirmations. This is about rebuilding the architecture of your internal world brick by brick, breath by breath. It's about learning to sit with your own pain without running, to witness your own fear without shaming it, to tend to your needs without believing they're a burden. It's about becoming the parent, the partner, the friend you never had, and offering those roles every day to your own soul. This kind of self-love is not soft. It's not indulgent. It's work. It's showing up for yourself when you want to disappear. It's making hard choices that honor your long-term peace instead of your short-term comfort. It's drawing boundaries, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. It's choosing to believe again and again that you matter, even when the world gave you every reason to believe otherwise. Let me ask you something that might challenge everything you've ever believed. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to be lovable and started living as if you already were? How would you speak to yourself? Who would you stop chasing? What would you finally allow yourself to feel or say or become? We often think of love as something we earn through perfection. But real love isn't a reward. It's a recognition. It's not given because you did everything right. It's offered because you are you. And if no one ever gave you that kind of love, you now face the greatest philosophical and psychological challenge of your life: to give it to yourself, to look at your wounds and say, I still choose you, to look at your mess and whisper, you're still worthy, to look at your history and declare you are not defined by what you didn't receive. Because once we begin to belong to ourselves, something shifts. The loneliness doesn't disappear entirely, but it softens. The hunger doesn't vanish, but it becomes manageable. We stop outsourcing our worth. We stop begging people to give us what we now know how to give ourselves. And from that place of inner belonging, of radical self-acceptance, we start to attract different kinds of relationships. Not ones built on fear or performance, but on resonance, on truth, on mutual presence. This is what it means to grow up, not just chronologically, but spiritually. To stop waiting for a perfect past and start building an honest present. To say, I was not loved the way I needed, and I still get to love myself anyway. That is the revolution. That is the healing. That is the philosophy of reclaiming your life after growing up without love. Because in the end, love isn't something that happens to you. It's something you choose to become. And when you do, when you finally become the safe place you've always searched for, everything changes. And maybe, just maybe, that's what you were meant to learn all along.